Projects die. What a way to start a video. Not every project is seen cleanly and clearly into long-term support and completion. In fact, the vast, overwhelming majority of projects will fail and fall into nothingness, often at varying stages. That's why of recent I've taken the idea of doing project post-mortems into hand and run with it, as it's a way of learning from the work you've done without doing that much extra. So the basic premise is this: you take something you've worked on, no matter how far it got into its development before being killed off. I'd just like to note that this doesn't have to strictly be linked to programming. It can in fact be used for nearly any type of project: art, video, or other media, music, you name it. And look at it from an overall perspective. Don't dive too deep into particular aspects unless you expect to face that specific challenge again. Just take an objective stance to how you look at the project and acknowledge the advantages of the project, what went well, the disadvantages, what didn't went well, and problems in the creation or development. Those are the key ones, because assuming that you're going to be doing this again, you'll want to learn from those mistakes. I've taken it onto myself to do just such a review for Talkflare version 1.0, which can pretty conclusively be called a failure. Talkflare v2 is something I plan to build and have started development on, but it will have a completely new backend, so it won't retain user data, and I kind of consider it a completely separate thing at this point. So with that in mind, let's look over what happened with Talkflare. Talking advantages, the main success of Talkflare v1 is that for its primary function, it worked. It was able to send notifications to user devices successfully on request without introducing any severe or compromising security problems. At the small scale of operation at least, the service worked smoothly and cleanly, with minimal issues in that core function. Moreover, the data being stored was complete and informative, with database tweaks being easy and extra past data display being efficient. Moreover, the app was pretty darn efficient overall. Being built in Android native and not using any sort of browser compatibility layer like things like React Native, it was built to be performant on Android, and I believe it achieved this well for being mostly synchronous. But let's move on to the disadvantages. Everything else. The account settings barely worked, setting profile pictures was a nightmare, the user circles would often fail to load or display incorrectly, the UI was kludgy, photos often wouldn't load and simply display placeholder messages, authentication broke for a while at launch. It was just a complete headache to operate, and a nightmare to use for users who didn't particularly understand its use case, something that I hardly understand anymore. I said that it was designed for those who struggle to find ways to start conversations or talk to people, and removes all the stress of finding a way to talk. But looking at the project in retrospect, I feel like I may have fallen to the sunk cost fallacy, and have been desperate to justify its existence. I feel that it's much more of an example utility than an actually utilitarian product. It was never designed to be popular, but I'm surprised it got the single-digit users that it did anyway. But that's enough slamming on the project that I'm liable to still work on in the future. Talkflare also experienced some notable problems within development. Now, I'll note that I'm looking at this project retrospectively. In an ideal situation, you'd be actively taking notes as you encounter problems, particularly as you find solutions, because chances are you will have to solve that problem again in the future. But with all that said, there are a couple of significant notes. Getting notifications to appear both in-app while it was open as well as in the notification bar was a bit of a challenge. Getting the backend to communicate the right data proved particularly time-consuming, as well as getting the front end to process it correctly. And more overarchingly, we experienced issues in developing native. I obviously had the intention to learn Java, which was the point of what I was doing, but the app that I was developing did not need that extra performance that working native offered. And frankly, it pigeonholed me for future projects when I needed to develop cross-compatible apps using React Native, a skill I had not strongly developed, but I could have developed then. So that gives me a good basis to work off of in terms of learning. First off, I need to test a lot more before launching. I know that by the time I was finishing Talkflare, I kind of just wanted it out into the world. I feel I may have ejected it a bit too soon. Some extra development time to iron out some of these bugs, or just add any error checking, would have saved a lot of appearance. I'm not going to say outright that I should have built v1 in React Native, as learning native Android development has helped me out a few times in future projects. But I do feel that having that experience in cross-compatible development may have been invaluable in the future. So I suppose it depends which I value more. Ultimately, what's happened is happened, so for moving forward I would certainly focus my efforts in software like React Native and Xamarin. Moreover, learning more methods of data bossing would be highly valuable to me, as a lot of what I do is that kind of transferring data between applications and frameworks, where knowing the good practices for doing so could have helped me a lot in transferring data to and from client devices. All of that I've just covered will be coming into mind as I work on TalkFly V2 sometime in the future. I'd advise you to learn from my mistakes. While I'm able to do project post-mortems on projects like TalkFly now, there are some of my projects where it's simply been too long, and as such it's much more difficult to actually learn from those subjects. So for the love of all that is good, look at your projects once they're done. Acknowledge what went good, give yourself credit for that, but learn from what went wrong. Otherwise you'll get stuck making the same bot multiple times over. Point made. Oh, hey, I'm just going to pull you out of the end card here for a moment. As I've been talking about quite a bit, I do software engineering for various clients, so consider hiring me. I'm looking for new clients for my software engineering business, Nickel Software, that builds both commercial and personal software for any and all needs, from simple informational websites to responsive services with desktop integration. We're happy to provide and service websites, mobile apps, commercial desktop software, and server-side applications. For more information and contact details, please head to nickelsoft.co.uk. Thanks for your consideration.